This is the Daily Technology Pulse podcast. Welcome aboard.
Welcome back to the Daily Technology Pulse, where we break down the tech that's shaping government IT. This is Rick from Daily. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a topic that should be keeping every IT leader up at night, which is cyber resilience. Now, imagine waking up to find that your entire agency's data has been locked by ransomware. The backup team is scrambling, your security team is scrambling, everybody's panicking, everything is on fire. Everybody's realizing, and maybe for the first time, that they've never actually talked to each other. So today we're going to talk about why that scenario is far too common and what government agencies can do to make sure recovery isn't an afterthought. And to help us unpack all this, I'm being joined today by Marlin McVay. Marlin serves as the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer at Cohesity, which, by the way, Marlin, that is quite the double duty. So go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know, just exactly how you ended up with both of those titles.
Oh, Lord. No, you're absolutely right. It's also a strange combination of titles. When I was asked to do it, I really kind of had to wrap my brain around that. But if you think about the CTO side, the Chief Technology Officer side of the house, responsibilities are kind of what is the art of the possible? How can we innovate or be more innovative? And on the CISO side, it's all, how can it hurt us? So really, in the end, when bringing these two together, especially for a company like Cohesity, where we're an innovative company and we're in the realms of, data management, cyber resiliency, data insights, and those types of things, really what it brings together is the ability to be not only the art of the possible, but do it in a very safe way that is very conscious of what the cyber security, cyber resiliency side of organizations would be concerned about.
Yeah. And, I got to say, Cohesity, obviously a global leader in AI-powered data security. You're trusted by organizations in more than 140 countries, 70% of the Fortune Global 500, very impressive background on the company. But I got to say, man, the CTO and the CISO hats, it's like being both the architect and the locksmith, right?
Yeah, it is. But again, it forces you to be a more security conscious and a safer architect, if you will.
No, that's fantastic. So, can you help our listeners understand the distinction between cybersecurity and cyber resilience?
Absolutely. So, you'd think it'd be really simple to kind of wrap our heads around this. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why this tends to be a pretty misunderstood topic. I think of cybersecurity as a whole, right? But cyber resiliency, while it is a part of cyber security, it's not necessarily the thing that we practice on a day-to-day basis, right? Think of cybersecurity or what we do, our muscle memory, where it's located in cybersecurity tends to be around the prevention and detection, the defense side of the house. Cyber resiliency is the response side of the house. The analogy that I've come up with that tends to get people to start wrapping their head around it or maybe having an aha moment is if you take a look at the word in the Webster Dictionary, the word resilience, right? They give a definition that pertains to material sciences. And so resiliency is how far a material can bend without breaking and then be able to snap back into place. Think of the bending as cybersecurity, right? So the adversaries coming into your network, you're trying to defend against them. They're trying to gain persistence. They're basically bending you, right? And if that breaks, you don't have cyber resiliency, right? You're not resilient. If you're resilient, they can bend you, but never actually break or hurt you. And then if they do penetrate, being resilient is being able to snap back to a trusted state. That's the cyber resiliency side. It's not something that we necessarily are doing on a daily basis. So those teams don't necessarily have that muscle memory. So that's why they end up going into what you described. And that is kind of the norm, right? Even with a plan, you end up, it's the things that you don't expect that end up having you with your hair on fire running around. Like the doors don't work, the locks, my card doesn't open this anymore. the phone systems don't, like the things that we don't think about that really kind of throw us for a loop. Unfortunately, these two groups tend to be very siloed until what you described earlier. Now all of a sudden they have to talk to one another because they're responding to a wiper or ransomware or some other type of destructive attack on their systems, and they're just not prepared.
So now, all right. So I imagine that when an agency does get hit, that lack of coordination becomes a real problem, right? Because how do you even know what's compromised if you can't see all your data in one place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we take a look at legacy systems, right? And this is really kind of the reason why Cohesity was founded back 12, 13 years ago, right? Was what we saw in organizations were secondary data ended up, tended to be the legacy version of it, which by the way, a lot of organizations are still, utilizing. They tend to be very fragmented with lots of different moving pieces, right? And then organizations might even have multiple backup and recovery systems for different types of data. Right? There's no unified approach to that. There's no concept of unified data classification. Where is my sensitive data? So yeah, moving to this not only simplifies it, but it creates a much, much better governance um, uh, architecture within that. I can make sure that I'm applying the right and same level of posture or security capability to all of my data, regardless of where it sits, whether it be in the cloud, whether it be on premise, multiple configuration screens for multiple products. And then when I want to add security to it, I'm bolting on some capability set. Can you see how having an overly complicated, many configuration environment leads to insecure infrastructure? The need for unifying the data management side of things. Then if we're going to, really encompass cybersecurity and try to tear down these walls between the infrastructure side of the house and the cybersecurity side of the house, then why wouldn't we be putting direct integrations between this unified data management platform and the cybersecurity tooling side of the house? So the EDR, the XDR, the SIM, the SOAR, the posture management, the ITSM tools. Why wouldn't there be direct integrations between those? AI-powered tools that do ransomware detection, malware detection, entropy detection, data classification. Why are we not sharing information between these two sides of the house so that we're much more prepared to do either response to something prior to a detonation or an event where, say, ransomware or some other destructive attack actually takes place, rapid recovery, clean room, all these things that, by the way, the infrastructure side of the house really doesn't necessarily know about. That whole response cadence or number of steps that you need to go through between an event, right, a clean room, a mitigation process, so that you can promote systems back into production that you trust, are secure. We've seen customers go 12, 13 times like that before they realize, wait a minute, maybe I'm not doing this correctly, right? I'm treating this like a disaster recovery, and maybe there's some more steps in there that we need to take. And that requires that integration between the cybersecurity side of the house and the infrastructure side of the house.
Look, we're in a situation where attacks are inevitable. All right. I don't think we could stress this enough. I mean, I think the statistic is something like 59% of organizations got hit by ransomware last year. You're like, you are one. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, so I'm just going to say you are one employee who's not paying that much attention and clicks on a bad link away from potential disaster. So what should they be doing differently right now?
You said 59%. Whenever I'm talking to an organization on stage speaking at some event, and I go, because that was the Sophos number for the last 2 years, was 59% of organizations. By the way, this wasn't a small smattering of companies that they looked at. It wasn't also just commercial companies, right? They did state and local, federal, right? But the number I like to convert that to is that is 1% away from being actually 3-4%. Anyway, basically it's a 2-in-1 shot that you have in a year to basically go through a ransomware or some other destructive cyber attack. 2 in 3, right? So you've got a 33, well, 40% chance that you're not, right? Okay. Going back to your question though, like what do we need to do? We have something called the Cyber Resiliency Maturity Model. And there are other ones like that out there, but we specifically developed ours to bridge that language or create a common lexicon between the infrastructure and the cybersecurity side of the house. The other thing that I always say about cybersecurity and cyber resiliency is they differ in the fact that cybersecurity is a world of maximums, right? I need a maximum, threat detection capability. I need a maximum endpoint detection capability. I'm always looking for the maximum ability. It's a world of minimums. We want maximum capability. Don't get me wrong there. But there is a line that an adversary can't push me past. Because if they push me past this line, right, I will have no ability to recover, right? So that's why we talk about things like a minimum viable response capability, a minimum viable organization, right? I have to have backups or something to recover from that survives this whole process, right? So you have to focus on that. So once you do that, start thinking about what I need or what the capability sets are that I need to achieve at least that very first minimum that I can't be pushed past. You start realizing I need unified data management. Everything within my organization needs to have the maximum cyber resiliency capabilities, right? And those fall in line with other things like I need it to be zero trust. Zero trust capabilities, you need those, right? I need strong access control. I need to be able to protect, the sensitive data, classify that data. So I need MFA. I might even need something like Quorum, which is a capability that we developed into our product that basically allows for not just multi-factor, but multi-person, right? Just imagine, I have my backups, but the adversary is able to go in and make themselves into an admin. Wouldn't you like it to make it so that, somebody promoting themselves to an administrator so they can change retention times or something along those lines, that maybe 2 or 3 other administrators that are already there would need to have a quorum to allow that to happen, right? So think of it as multi-person. Then to achieve things like the ability to make sure that those backups or that data cannot be encrypted, deleted, corrupted, destroyed. So I need things like the ability to do air-gapped vaulting. I need it to be immutable by default. I need data lock and worm. I need to be able to do legal hold. And then lastly, once I have all that, and I can basically guarantee that a copy of this is going to survive any detonation event or any destructive cyber event, right? I need the ability to rapidly recover. Does that mean rapidly recover directly into production, like you would do in a DR situation where you still trust the data? Yes. Rapidly recover or set up an IRE or a clean room so that I can start figuring out where the adversary is, how they got in, how are they maintaining persistence, how did they elevate their privileges, and then figure out how to mitigate that so I can move that data or those systems back into a trusted state to put back into. But that needs to be a very rapid process because time is what matters in that situation.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And, I have to say, first of all, zero trust in the backup environment, trust no one. You're really going to appreciate the paranoia when this happens, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then on top of that, think back to Mike Tyson back in the day when he was not, just standing there getting punched in the ring for money on Netflix, but like the real Mike Tyson, when he said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's kind of what happens when the punch is ransomware and your mouth is your entire agency's data, right? It's not just having that plan, but it's knowing how to execute it because everybody has a plan. And then the first time something goes wrong, again, it's the hair on fire situation.
Yeah.
You suddenly forget how to stop, drop, and roll. Having a plan, but then executing the plan.
Organizations, I'll go in. One of the things I hate to hear is, do you have a recovery environment? And oftentimes what I will hear is, like, we don't have the money or the resources to do that. But then there's also other companies like one of our partners, Google and Mandiant. They're creating services to do that kind of stuff. You need to have this environment. And the reason why is because you need practice. Right? I talk to organizations all the time and they're like, well, we do tabletops. We do tabletops at this frequency. I look at tabletops as kind of like a D&D role-playing game. Right? We all sit around a table, and that's why we call it a tabletop. So it's very similar, right? This happens, this is what we do, this happens, this is what we do. But have you actually done it? Have you tried it? What is your plan to bring AD back online? Because I'm guaranteeing, I think it's 90%, right, of organizations, their AD is basically hosed. It's the way the adversaries have maintained persistence and elevated privileges, right? So, that's step one, right? You need that to just get your organization back up and running. You should be practicing these. You should be red teaming and blue teaming these events to the best of your ability. Do you have to do it on the scale of simulating your entire organization? No, but let's get the IRE and the minimum viable response capability. So you have DNS, you have AD, and maybe a tier 1 or tier 2 application backup, go through that, right? And do that on a fairly regular basis. And then lastly, what I'll say is if you're treating these like just regular audits and it's a pass-fail, you're doing it wrong, right? When it comes to the response and recovery side of the house, if you pass, you do everything, you actually go through and practice it, you don't just do a tabletop, pat yourself on the back and have the pizza party and be happy that you passed, right? But then ask yourself, what are we not thinking about? What might they try that we wouldn't have been ready for, right? And try to, basically figure out, what would make you fail. And then the next time, pass that one. And the next time, figure out what they might try that we would fail against.
Yeah. And I mean, you really got to do that because when you're talking about a tabletop exercise without the actual recovery testing, it's, it's kind of like you're watching YouTube videos about swimming and then jumping into the ocean.
I'll give you a really good example. And I harp on AD, right?
Please do.
And when you're starting the recovery process, AD is one of the very first, right? Take a look at the recovery process for, unless you're using, us and maybe one other company for this, take a look at the steps that you would have to go through. It could take, all day, if not multiple days, just to get your AD back to a trusted state. And that's kind of step one. Why wouldn't you be utilizing something that can do that in a much more automated fashion and do it in, minutes to an hour, as opposed to spending your whole first day or two trying to just get Active Directory and authentication back online?
Nope. I understand. But, we've talked about the problem, and now, definitely want to let listeners know that, Cohesity is here to really help these agencies tackle these challenges. Let's just talk a little bit more, again, about the solutions that Cohesity offers with some of these key capabilities.
No, absolutely. So we try to, one of the core tenets and reasons why I came on board with Cohesity, and one that I appreciate quite a bit, is, we're going to list a number of these, but simplicity is kind of in our DNA. And that's actually one of the core problems, aside from everything else in legacy systems, right? So each one of these kind of works together and just layers on an additional capability set. And depending on who you are, whether or not it's state and local and federal, there's differences in there, right? But the other good thing is it's one software. So everything we talk about, whether or not it's on-premise or virtualized or in the cloud, right, is one software. It's not different across each one of those. And I've worked for organizations where the cloud version was completely different or incompatible with the on-premise or the virtual version. So Data Protect is really the core, right? And that gives you the ability to ingest all of the data, right, into the backup, keep it immutable, encrypted, all the things that we would expect from there. And then also start doing something called Data Hawk. And this starts layering in the data classification, ransomware detection, some other detections the foundation is that data protection, data security side of the house with Data Protect product.
No, that's amazing stuff. And again, it's all about having those conversations, right? But it's not just the conversations internally. It's also the conversations with the folks who can help provide the solution. And that's where DALY and Cohesity really come in.
If they want to know more, contact Eric Goodeve, eric.goodeve, Goodeve, at cohesity.com. And then we actually just entered into the OneGov with the GSA. So this is on the federal side. Oh, and also you can go to cohesity.com.
Fantastic. Marlin, I have to say this has been great. Definitely want to thank you for all the information. I think the message here, folks, is clear. Backup isn't just insurance. It's part of your defense. And if you're not thinking about recovery as a core capability, then you're definitely leaving yourself exposed. So, Marlin, again, thanks so much for joining us on the Technology Pulse. We appreciate everything, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Hey, Rick, I really appreciate you having me on here. It's been a blast. So thank you for having me on the show. And hopefully we'll be able to do this again sometime.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Technology Pulse podcast produced by DALY. Before we go, we would like to remind you of a few legal considerations. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of DALY or its leadership. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide legal, financial, or other professional advice. The content of this podcast is protected by copyright laws and may not be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted without the written permission of DALY Computers Inc. Any products, services, or other references mentioned in this podcast are for informational purposes only and do not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by DALY. Thank you again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us at marketing@daly.com.